Hello, I'm Krista McAllister, and welcome to Cerius Leadership. Whether you are growing your business, growing your career, or possibly both, thank you for listening. I am joined today by Brian Von Cross, and Brian, I'm excited to get a chance to focus on you today. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Kristen. Great to be here.
You're always doing so much for others, and that includes organizing a monthly breakfast group, which is how you and I actually initially met. And I love that you've taken all of these different individuals that you've met through your various careers and found a way to connect them over breakfast on a monthly basis from your career as a U.S. Marine to starting and growing your own physical and cybersecurity business. You're able to bring this unique blend of military discipline and business acumen to the table and converse with anyone there, and it just comes so naturally. First off, Brian, I want to say thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Kristen.
It it means a lot to many of us, and having been part of that, I want to start there of how you transitioned from being an active duty U.S. Marine, once a Marine, always a Marine, to
Mhm.
a business owner, because I looked up the statistic, and according to the SBA, 9.1% of small businesses in the US are military veteran owned. Why do you think so many veterans do turn to entrepreneurship?
Well, I can't speak for the other 90%, but for my little 1%, I felt when I was in the military, I had a lot of creative ideas of like what I wanted to do, what I wanted to achieve, and how to help others. And while the Marine Corps is pretty open to innovation and pretty tolerant and accepting of it, it's still a large bureaucracy, and you still get somewhat capped at what you can do on your own. So for me, my path to entrepreneurship was me wanting the freedom to kind of follow my own goals, my own dreams, follow my own potential, so to speak. And I have a feeling that's probably why a lot of other business owners are the same. They have the military discipline to kind of found or run their own business, combined with the desire
Mhm.
to be creative and kind of to achieve something unique.
What were some of those creative ideas or innovations that looking back then you thought, I know there's another way to do this, or I know that I can make an impact and help?
Well, that's kind of what brought me into my first business. So when I transitioned out of the Marine Corps, I actually worked for a nonprofit initially. Um, my friend who I served with years in the past, he had left probably 6, 7 years before I did. And he started a nonprofit to help out the farmer communities throughout Africa. And he was doing it the right way. He had a lot of specialists help out the farmers in every aspect of their life, from the farming aspect to the education aspect to the financial aspect, helping to get their families out of poverty. And some of the stuff I was doing in Afghanistan at that time, in my last couple of deployments, was called Village Stability Operations. So working with small communities overseas, helping them kind of get out of poverty and kind of establish security against the
Mhm.
enemy forces there. And I felt we weren't doing it the best way. We didn't have the right mix of people there. We had the best security experts in the world, the military there helping them with security.
Mhm.
But every other aspect, like the agriculture aspect, the finance aspect, we didn't have the right people there. So when I saw my friend's company doing it the right way, by having the right people there on the ground, helping out these small communities, I wanted to jump on board and help them out. So that was my first company I joined right as I left the military.
Was it a nonprofit at that time? And in what capacity did you join them?
So it was a nonprofit, and he hired me as his security director. Because his goal at the time was to expand from his initial projects, which he had in Kenya and Ethiopia and East Africa. He wanted to expand to a more higher risk conflict zone, because those
Hmm.
communities there were in the most need, but no one was helping them out because they're all too scared to go there. It was too high risk.
Hmm.
So he wanted me to help him out to be one of the first to navigate that, to be able to actually deliver impact to those high risk areas. So my first year with the company, we did a lot of scout visits. We visited places like Mogadishu, Somalia, Eastern DR Congo, Northeast Nigeria. It's through that work I learned how to do security for a nonprofit, which led me to start my own company to do security for other nonprofits that had similar needs. So that's kind of the genesis of my company.
What was something that was completely unexpected? I can't imagine the learning curve, even having done some of that in Afghanistan, you're now doing it for maybe a different reason, another purpose, a different why that takes on a different meaning to you. And I can't imagine going into those areas and how you were able to approach them. What were maybe some things that lessons learned or surprises?
The biggest lesson learned by far was coming from the Department of Defense, where we had an endless budget to do whatever we wanted, so to speak, to a nonprofit that had no budget. So trying to be secure in a high-risk area with no budget for armored vehicles, for tons of guards, anything like that,
Mhm.
was a learning curve. Um, and the key lesson I learned from doing that work uh, was the amount of security you could achieve through relationships. For each country that we visited, I was able to basically network my way into the country. I connected first with people in the US who had friends and contacts and family members in that country. I connected with them. And through that, I was able to connect to the right kind of community leaders in the areas we're going to. And they granted us access to those communities. So, for example, when I was in Northeast Nigeria, we connected to the local emir of that area, who's a traditional ruler of that area. They had a lot of kind of respect and from the local populace. We traveled with one of those people, and anywhere we went, the rep who was with us, he would get texts from tens of 20s of villagers saying, "Oh, here's safe, here's not safe, don't come here, you can come here." So we're able to navigate that risk landscape just through awareness, because we had the whole village reporting to us about what was going on. So we're able to get very far into kind of hostile territory, much farther than like the State Department could, who came like a month later. Um, just through having that awareness, that the right relationship. And we did the same thing in Eastern Congo and the same thing in Somalia as well.
In business, we talk about building teams. I think it starts with building a village, and that literally it takes a village took on a whole different meaning for you as I can see as they're navigating you through that. I can imagine for some people having gone through that, they look back and say, I'm never doing that again. And you said, I'm going to make a business out. I'm going to go help others. Where did that come from?
Well, I saw the good that was achieved by doing that, because the nonprofit was able to set up a project. And
Mhm.
for example, that project that they set up in Northeast Nigeria still exists today, about 7, 8 years later,
Wow.
helping out hundreds, up to thousands of people. Um, so knowing that something that I'm good at through my experience is able to unlock that type of potential and achieve that type of good by helping someone else do that, that's very fulfilling. So that's what drove my my desire to help out other nonprofits with that same problem.
I can imagine in business as people say, Brian, we don't have the resources. We can't do this. We can't do that. And you're going, oh, yes, we can. Let me tell you this story of how you can make it happen. So, as you started your firm, what were some of those initial steps that you took to transition from the NGO that your friend was doing to here's how I'm going to do this widespread, and I'm going to do it through my own resources?
It was I wish I could say there was a strategic plan. I had a business plan all written out and something very formal, but it was a lot messier than that. Um, I went on LegalZoom, formed an LLC for myself. I chose a company name that used from some military terms that means 24/7 security.
Mm-hmm.
And then building out the relationships I built through my NGO, my nonprofit work, I went one client at a time. I made connections and people saw the value and I could provide. So I established a contract with a new company, helping set up shop in Congo, then another company helping him set up shop in Niger. So one relationship at a time, I grew slowly. And I learned from each client. Each client had totally different goals, totally different culture, totally different way of doing things, totally different way of interfacing with the locals. That I became a much better security expert from learning from each client. It's amazing how much I learned in those first couple of years.
It's interesting. I can imagine you've got a similar theme, though they're different clients, different countries, and it's all there. I can imagine there's a here's the SOP, for how we go about that. The lessons of agility in truly life or death situations and what you're doing. Um, Sometimes that's hard as you're building a company. How did you put in, that structure around something that is fairly unstructured? And you've got to be able to be as agile as you possibly can.
I think it's a combination of two things. One, I think my natural inclination is to prefer that 0 to 1 phase, so to speak, where you're creating something from nothing.
Mhm.
I actually kind of like that phase a lot. And I think some of the training and experiences I had in my last few years in the Marine Corps, where those part of a special operations command, where you're expected to kind of create something from nothing. You're expected to go in the middle of nowhere in a somewhat hostile area and create an order from chaos. So I think the combinations of my natural preference and some of that training helped me be pretty well suited towards this type of environment. I was going to a new country with a new company, helping set up something from scratch.
How did it then evolve into, can imagine it didn't just happen overnight. As you went through each phase, what were some of those decision points to say, I am going to go in this direction, I'm not going to go in this direction? Because as you said, rarely do we start a business saying, here's the plan, here's where I'm going to get to, here's how I'm going to get there. It just opportunities present themselves.
Very, very much so. So at a certain point, I reached a cap as far as my personal bandwidth. I had several nonprofit clients that supporting, helping them with both in-person support and kind of remote support. And I kind of hit a cap as far as I didn't have time left in the day to support that anymore. I couldn't really grow my company any further with what I had. So I decided to not pivot, but to expand from there.
Mhm.
So I actually expanded domestically. I started building up my security footprint in the US. So I got a California security license for my company, and then started providing more traditional security services in the state of California. So bodyguard services and guard services for clients.
Mhm.
So I was able to hire more people to handle some of that busy work. So I built upon the foundation of my nonprofit work to help out other private sector clients here in California.
And as you're building that out, did you have a dream for here's where I want it to go at this point? Here's, kind of that intentional, purposeful, here's why I want to do it. And so I'm going to build it to support that. Or I got a new client. I need extra bodies. Let's go.
There's a little mix of both. Uh,
Okay.
I think the guiding principle that I always had in my initial team, my core team had, is to provide truly custom service to the client. Because every client
Hmm.
has a unique kind of problem set, a unique kind of risk landscape they're trying to navigate. So we want to be like their risk navigator to help them guide them to their goal they're trying to achieve. So that's different. One company is or one client who's like a tech company CEO with a certain services that they require. Another company that's a small law firm. Another company that's a medical tech company. Each one of these companies and clients has a different goal in mind and a different needs different services. So our goal is always to tailor it as precisely as possible to give them what they need to help them get to their goal, their whatever their goal may be.
Normally, I wouldn't go into tell me exactly how you go about this, but it's so fascinating. You think of they make movies out of what you do, Brian. What does physical security usually entail? What goes into it? You can imagine all the questions I have, the types of clients that you have. You mentioned some of them, but is it the physical offices that you're guarding? Is it the high risk individuals? How are they making a decision saying we've got to have some physical security here?
Every client's unique. So some of our clients are individuals, like C-suite personnel who protect either at their homes or while they travel. Others are the facilities that need protection because they have
Mhm.
sensitive equipment or just want to protect the people who work there. And a lot of the work is actually the non-sexy stuff. It's not the Jason Bourne stuff. It's actually a lot of the planning preparation. So for example, executive protection. Everyone
Mhm.
knows the bodyguard and Kevin Costner carrying her out of the facility. The meat of executive protection is planning so that type of response is not necessary. The Do a lot of advanced preparation, a lot of advanced work, as they call it, to really scout out the locations, plan out every single contingency plan you can to make sure you're ready for any emergency. Make relationships with the venue owner, the local security, the hospitals there, have maps done. And then the work itself, when done right, it's actually pretty routine and kind of boring, which is good. You don't want things to be exciting in executive protection. You want things to be as boring as possible. Because in the end, security is a supporting effort. We're just there to enable someone else to reach their goals. If we're in the main effort or the main event, that's a problem. These things are going wrong. So as our goal is to be as discreet, as invisible as possible, just allowing the business or the goal to be achieved.
And then I know that you eventually expanded. What was the decision to say, I'm going to expand my services inside of California versus I'm going to go from California to this state to this state? Because I think that's a pivotal point that a lot of businesses get to is either I'm going to take everything that can possibly come to me, or I'm going to now intentionally expand, and it's either services, geography, client base, etc. What did that look like for you?
So over the years, we expanded in two different ways. Geography-wise,
Mhm.
mainly through the people I knew. If I had a close friend that I served with, another veteran that I trusted in another state, I approached him to see if they're willing to kind of set up shop for my company in that state. And some people said no, some people said yes. And through that
Mhm.
network of friends who I served with, we set up shop in Nevada, Arizona, and Washington State.
Wow.
Um, because in the security industry, every state is its own license. You can't just
Mhm.
support the whole country, unfortunately. So slowly we grew state by state, offering the same services. So that's one expansion route we took. And then most recently, over the last 2 years, I decided to expand to cybersecurity because that's kind of the last section of the spectrum, so to speak, of security
Mhm.
that we're serving. And a lot of my clients had a need. They had cybersecurity risks that we weren't addressing. So I wanted to build a department that could address that risk so we could truly provide physical and cybersecurity clients.
I can imagine if you've got a bad actor, is it typically they're breaching one or the other, or there's some connection between the two? There's the physical breach as well as some type of cyber breach.
The more serious criminals, they can either conduct a cyber attack or a physical attack. And the first step is usually surveillance, with a significant portion of that surveillance being on the cyber side. So for, let's say, a hostile actor, a threat actor
Mhm.
that wants to target one of my clients, they usually conduct at least one of two forms of surveillance. On the cyber side, they learn as much as possible about the client online. They look at their social media profiles if they exist, their LinkedIn profiles, any open source information. And from then, they invest in physical surveillance. They watch
Mhm.
patterns of the C-suite personnel, or they look at the company, the facility, watching it for a while. And once they have a good understanding of what patterns are there, then they can start conducting actions, whether it be cyber or physical actions. So cyber is always a significant portion of the kind of the attack cycle, so to speak.
All right, so now you're able to deliver the holistic part of that. We've talked about you kind of built it step by step versus here's the master plan. I'm going to build it. I think back to building Legos. I never had in my mind what this thing was going to look like, and it just was pieced together. Looking back, what were some of those lessons that you said, okay, next time, here's what I'm going to do a little differently, or gosh, if I would have done this in another way, um, I would have gotten there a little further. As you now continue to build it, what are you carrying those lessons forward?
I think one of the key lessons I learned the hard way is I could have safely taken more time to kind of assess a choice, like a pivot or expansion choice, and assess it with more financial metrics and kind of projections,
Mhm.
and made a smarter expansion path, so to speak. Because sometimes I expanded too quickly with a bright idea, and I kind of got surprised by the costs emotionally and financially later. So I
Mhm.
think if I did a more deliberate planning process ahead of time and kind of looked at all the facets of that growth, what that meant beyond just what a good idea was and how cool it'd be, that would save us a lot of pain in our growth.
It reminds me of what you just said, what you do for clients. You spend most of your time in the planning and preparation stage.
Very true. I should use my own lessons on myself. Yeah.
Well, we all do that 100%. I think there's always that quote when you're building out technology or you're developing is for every $1 you spend in the ideation stage or planning stage is $10 that you spend in implementation. That becomes $100 for anything you do post implementation. It's the do you want to spend $1 or $100
Yeah.
as you look back at that. As you look at the transition from the military, as you were building your company, I can imagine the core values and kind of that mission, because that's one of the things I've always admired so much about the Marine Corps is there's a purpose, there's a mission, there's a camaraderie, there's a team there. Did you carry that forward as you built a company and have that here is what we all are here for? Here is our why.
I think a lot of the stuff I carried over, I didn't have to write down because, especially my core team and I, we had lived it for so many years that we kind of just did it. We kind of lived it. And I think the key aspect of my core team, the brought to the table, is leadership.
Mm-hmm.
We just had a lot of leadership training, formal training in the military. The military just is a leadership training academy, essentially, at its heart.
Mm-hmm.
And just a lot of experience. I was lucky enough to be in command probably 12, 13 years out of my 15 years there in the Marines.
Wow.
So I got a lot of repetitions as far as dealing with different problems, like either personality problems, financial problems, operational problems. So I learned the hard way about what to do, what not to do, what success looks like. And I was lucky enough to have a lot of good and much better leaders than I did around me that I could learn from. Um, so I think that same experience was mirrored by my core team as well. They had similar experiences as I did. So I think our leadership professionalism exhibited by my core team as far as opening up every new state and kind of guiding the new teams, etc. That was a key part of our growth and our success initially.
It's incredible because then since you'll have that same basis starting at that, and I like it, some people come together after company or large, you talked about it, bureaucracy. It's a large organization to work with when you're talking about the United States military, similar to what people who come from Fortune 100s or Fortune 500s. And they like to great leadership development programs, and they like to bring part of their team into their next venture. What were some of those things to be able to say, why don't you come join? As we are growing our business, it's much easier to grow it with people you've worked with before, with people you know, and you've been able to do that. Why do you think so many individuals did join you in that journey? Because there's some unknowns there, but they wanted to follow you.
I was lucky with the friends I formed in the military, and like I said, some of them had other plans. They want to join me. They wish me the best, but they want to join me. Others want to express themselves, be creative, and entrepreneurship path allowed them to be creative. And some of them already had their own like personal LLCs as well. They want to do multiple things. So kind of like me, I was doing like 10 things at once. And I think what I provided them up front, because I couldn't provide them insane salaries or insane benefits packages. I couldn't do that as a startup.
Mm-hmm.
But I provided them freedom. I said, with me, I give you a lot of freedom to kind of create your own mini company within mine. I give you a lot of freedom to kind of chart your own course. Obviously, there's some goals that we need to achieve as a company, but if you want to go left instead of right, I'm pretty open to that. And we'll have a healthy discussion about it, and I allow you to be pretty creative. So that, I think that attracted a lot of the talent I drew in initially for my team.
Which is incredible because growing a company is never easy. It almost feels like every day is a new challenge, and every time you turn around, you think you've solved something, another challenge comes up. Yeah, you're laughing. You know exactly what I'm
Very true.
talking about. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced and kind of how you got past them?
The biggest challenge by far was we experienced this last year and a half. We grew significantly with our guard services that we
Mhm.
offered to clients, and we grew too fast. We we didn't see or expect a lot of the overhead that came with it, a lot of the
Mhm.
The additional financial burdens, as well as the additional burden on our management team, as far as managing such a huge workforce. Our labor pool increased from like 13 people to 130 people in a year, which is insane. It's too fast. So that tuition was expensive as far as learning how to handle that beast. And that dealing with clients in the security industry, that the payment terms are never favorable for the vendor. And it's for some reason, the security industry is very comfortable with net 30, net 60, net 90 terms. So it's just the basics of like finance and accounting that kind of caught us by surprise as far as that. So we're able to weather that storm. We trimmed down our workforce to kind of key contracts. We did the basics. We raised our prices to an acceptable level. We only
Mhm.
accepted positive payment terms, and we dropped any client that wouldn't support that.
Oh.
So it was messy, but it was necessary, and we kind of weathered that storm. And now we're on the upswing. We're on the way out of that dark period.
Putting kudos for it. It's not just one, or it's not, hey, we'll just weather this. You looked at it and took a number of different actions that I can't imagine that any of those were easy.
No, nothing was pleasant about this last year and a half. And it reminded me of a book I read years ago, like The Hard Thing About the Hard Things. It just, you got to choose the lesser of two evil choices a lot. And
Hmm.
hard things like letting good people go, that were good people, very talented. They love the company, but we just couldn't afford to keep them on. And so we had to let them go, and we had to set them up for success in another company as best we could. That was by far the worst part. And so, yeah, nothing was pretty or fun about this last year and a half.
I think that's the double-edged sword of, we all want growth, we all want high growth, we want to double in size, we want to be bigger than we are. Uh, there's a lot of baggage and a lot of challenges that come with it, that you've succinctly laid out there. If you were to do it, kind of your next stage of growth as you plan for that, because I have no doubt, Brian, you will continue to grow. What are some ways that you'll approach that, or advice you'd give to others facing, because you never want to turn down business, but you've got to grow it's tough to grow in a responsible way. It's almost like those two things are oxymorons.
I think the key change we made is that I've expanded my kind of core team of decision makers far outside the initial core team, which is all military folks, because we are smart in our own way. We're very good operations, but we had very poor understanding
Hmm.
about kind of business basics that other companies have, and like finance and accounting and market research, etc. So I expanded my core team from the military specialists to like business specialists. So using a mix of either full-time or fractional, like the CFO, personnel,
Hmm.
CMO, etc. Kind of get those insights and those perspectives that we're missing initially. So we make smarter, more well-informed decisions on the future, and we have a full transparency of what's going to happen as far as the cost, the potential challenges or roadblocks. So getting the right experts to the table with the right perspectives is probably the key change we made in future growth.
I thank you for hitting that. I want to double click on that just a little bit, because you look at, so many of us are experts in what we do, and where you may advise someone on security, you are the expert in security, and you can see what probably no one else can see, that you're able to have that humility, that vulnerability to say, but I'm not an expert in everything in the business. I'm gonna go find people who are.
I think what helped me get to that point quicker is I've been pretty proactive about networking since I got out of the military. And
Mhm.
networking allowed me to connect to experts in their own fields. And I realized the same expertise I built after 15 years in the military, someone else has built 15
Mhm.
years in the banking and finance industry or in marketing or HR. And they're top tier NFL level pros in those fields. And I'd be an idiot not to listen to them and not to kind of learn from their insights and their experience. So I learned to kind of grow my decision making team to incorporate more of the expertise than I had before.
Thank you so much for sharing. Kind of, sometimes it's tough for us to say, God, I didn't get that one right, but I'll get it right next time. And here's how I'm going to do that. I know there's a lot of things that you did get right. What are some things that you feel you got them right? You really nailed it the first time out?
Two things pop to mind. One, the initial nonprofit work that I still continue to this day. We didn't drop them off. We just expanded from that foundation. So nonprofit
Yeah,
work is still very fulfilling. Like seeing what those nonprofit clients can do and they're still doing with the people they're working with overseas, that's very fulfilling. And I don't see ourselves ever getting rid of that component of our company. And then my initial core team, uh, again, mostly people I've served with. We've weathered some really tough storms together, and I can't think of any other team that would do that with me. So having this group of together that stuck together, and we stuck together in combat, and then we're sticking together through business. That's probably the second right thing I've done.
congratulations. I think that you, in your initial nonprofit work and how you've gone into each of those countries, you seem to just really live that uh, leaning on others, putting together the right village, getting the right people around you, and listening to them.
It's one of the things I learned the most by working in those countries is that there's tons of potential that's unfortunately locked in many cases by poverty. Uh, So being able to be a part of the effort to unlock that potential was very fulfilling. And you see these brilliant people that finally have a chance to kind of be creative and kind of do good that didn't have a chance before. That's why I find that work so fulfilling.
That's incredible. So I imagine that we talked about this at the beginning of 9.1% of small business owners are military veterans. Some it works out great, some it's challenging, like it is for so many business owners. What advice would you give to anyone either looking into entrepreneurship or making a big transition from a corporate career, from the military, from some other career to being an entrepreneur and leveraging that skill set into a valued business?
The key advice I give to any military members thinking about transitioning either out of the military or from a stable career to entrepreneurship is to network.
Sure, that's another way of saying it from a stable advice to give someone when you're in a stable situation to something that is not so much. Absolutely.
I have a lot of friends who are in a very stable job and they're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. And I give them
Mhm.
the ground truth, at least from my perspective. Like, don't having a stable income is nothing to laugh at, especially if you have a family and you have young kids or kids in school. Nothing to discount. There's nothing, no shame in having a stable income. And you can choose to make the entrepreneurship jump maybe when you can tolerate more risk in your life, so to speak, or your family can tolerate more risk. So I try to be very clear about the ground truth about entrepreneurship because it's maybe some people figure it out, but I can't figure out that stable way to kind of just be safe the whole way through. So I try to make it as transparent as possible.
Mhm.
So the key advice I give to military members who are interested in either entrepreneurship or getting out in the military is to network. Network early, network often, and network actively. The only true way they'll really learn about what's out there. You'll get connected to people, they'll show you a different side of life that you've never seen before, and you're like, oh, that sounds awesome. I love that. Let me do that. Or they'll explain the reality, what's in your, and discount maybe what the impression or assumption you have in your head and kind of guide you away from a certain field. And bottom line, you just meet interesting people. You connect and learn and grow as a human being that way. So I found networking is probably the best way to kind of grow and learn.
What advice for is networking doesn't necessarily come naturally, especially if you coming from the military, you kind of have a built-in network and a built-in family there, versus then coming out and needing to walk into a room full of people that you've never met before, or new organizations. How did you break through that, or at least get that started? What would be some first steps towards that?
How I personally broke through it is somewhat through necessity. So my first company that I worked for, the nonprofit, didn't really have a network outside of itself. And I saw that it needed one. It needed to connect to several people. So a hub for a lot of nonprofits is Washington, D.C. So I
Hmm.
just set a goal to travel once a month to DC for about a week. And luckily, I was able to do it very low cost. I had a close friend who I served with who's there, so I just couch surfed in this place for the week I was there, and just either walked or Ubered everywhere. So I had about 3 to 5 meetings a day with various think tanks, with State Department personnel, with other nonprofits, and literally I just asked for help. because I was new to Africa. I was new to the nonprofit sector. And I admitted that. And I said, hey, I'm new to both of these fields. I'd like some advice. I'm going to Kenya next month. I'm going to Ethiopia. I'm going to Nigeria. What advice do you have? And I think luckily Washington, D.C. is very network centric, very network focused.
Mhm.
Everyone's very supportive. Everyone freely gave help and advice. And in a couple of months, I had like a thriving network in DC, and that helped support the company. And they're connecting us to people overseas, which helped out set up projects overseas. It just multiplied its impact with every person I connected with. So I learned through trial and error that one, you don't need doesn't need to be transactional. Like you have to go there and have something offer and get. It doesn't have to be that give and take.
Mhm.
You can literally ask for help, and people are willing to kind of help you out. And I think the implied concept with networking is that you'll pay it forward. And that's what I'm trying to do now. Like all these people help me out in the beginning. I'm really working my butt off to help out other people and just kind of get their first connection, so to speak.
I love that you've experienced the same. I've always wondered because I've lived in being military spouse, I've lived in DC, lived in California, and DC is just different. The openness, so you can call just about anyone and they will take a meeting. And
Mhm.
as long as you're not there to ask for business or to sell yourself, you're truly just asking for advice. You can network 24/7. And I love the 3 to 5. You never have a meal alone. Every single meal you're meeting with someone and connecting with someone, and you've been able to zero in on that and bring that back to kind of how we connected, which is you started your own networking group here locally, which is a military town. And I know I've met a lot of individuals who are looking to exit the military, they're looking to start up something new, and you just always have them stop by and you're introducing them around.
I try to, yeah,
I
because I try
absolutely
to
love
teach them that it's possible and not to be afraid of networking. So I think a lot of military members, they associate networking with like sales and like the sales has a very negative connotation in the military for whatever reason. Like everyone thinks that like a used car salesman, they're trying to like this be
that.
sneaky, etc. So I try to show them that networking is just a valuable way of sharing and making connections and building relationships. It's just sharing value. It's not, you don't have to sell anything, you just connect. And I think at their 1 or 2 breakfasts, for example, some of these military service members, they see that for the first time.
I love it. And Brian, thank you so much for paying it forward and creating a safe place for them to be able to learn that kind of the way you did, and all those individuals that have helped you get to where you're at, because I have no idea will continue to grow from there. And I thank you for letting me put the spotlight on you for once, because that's who you are, is giving so much and helping others in so many ways. So I'm glad that we were able to dig in and learn more about you this time.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for your time and for sharing your time with me.
Thank you so much for your service and all that you do and continue to do. And thank you for joining me today on Serious Leadership.
Thank you, Kristen.